From Calvary Church of Santa Ana, this is the Calvary Life Podcast, the show where we share stories, laugh together, and have discussions about faith, life, and God with people from Calvary Church. Here's your host, Eric Wakeling.
All right, welcome again to the Calvary Life Podcast. Thank you for joining us. Today we have with us Melissa Brosch.
Oh, hey.
How you doing?
I'm good. I'm happy to be here.
Awesome. We are very happy. I am very happy to have you. So this is I can't believe that you haven't been on the Calvary Podcast before. And
I'm so wordy.
I know I have to apologize for this because I feel like you would have a lot to share. And I believe that you have great things to share. I think everybody that sort of knows Calvary knows you, but what is your role here at Calvary now?
First, I forgive you.
Yes.
Take me a minute. But,
I know.
No, I'm just kidding.
Sorry.
My role at Calvary currently is I am the pastor of Disability Ministries.
Yes.
But I've been at Calvary for a really long time.
Yeah, how long?
18 years.
18 years.
Isn't that crazy?
That is crazy. Okay, so let's get into like a little bit of then your Calvary origin story and how you got to this place. So how did you come to Calvary?
It's so fun. Okay, so originally I had started out in youth ministry as an intern at a church.
Whereabouts?
Yeah, this church called Ocean Hills Community Church in San Juan Capistrano.
Sounds like a great church.
It's a great church. It's been changed into like
really
5 different churches.
Anymore, yeah.
But I worked with this guy named Eric.
Oh.
He was just this goober, very
Pretty wise.
mature. Yeah. Just kidding. No, I worked with you, and
Yes.
I was your intern at
Yes.
Ocean Hills doing junior high ministry and loved it. And when you left.
Yes.
And abandoned.
I did abandon you.
Me and came to Calvary.
Yeah.
Told me what a great church it was. And then we kind of talked about a potential internship with high school ministry. So I became the high school girls ministry intern with Matt Doan and Tim Nellis.
Yes.
Victor Estrada and Ryan Shook. We had this huge team.
It's so awesome.
Yeah.
Yeah. And that was, I think it was only about a year. I had been here like a year. And
Yeah,
I'm
you
just
hadn't
like,
been here
we
very
got to
long.
get Melissa up here, you know?
Appreciate it.
Yes.
It worked out. Oh my gosh.
It did work out.
It's been a while.
18 years later, because
Yep.
I've been here 19. So
Yeah.
that's amazing. And so what were there any other kind of, what other kind of connections early on did we have? Would you want to share anything about some of that?
Oh, you mean you and me?
Yeah.
Yeah, well, there's so many. Oh, gosh. This is so fun. Eric, first of all, I remember being in junior high.
Yes.
And I remember Eric for a couple different reasons. One, he would lead worship at my school on Wednesdays at chapel because I went to a
Yes.
Christian school. And so I could always hear him rocking out, and it was really funny. You're
I don't know
great.
if people anymore know I even play guitar. It's
That's true.
or,
He does, folks.
I barely
He plays
play guitar anymore. Yeah.
Yep. And so I remember that. But then also there was that stint where you dated my sister, and when I was 13 years old.
It's true.
It's true. It's true. It didn't really work out.
No. I liked your family, though. I liked hanging out with your family.
My family is pretty rad. I love them too. But sometimes it's not a fit.
No,
But
it
I
wasn't
sent
a fit.
you on
I'm
your
very
way
happy.
as the little sister
Yeah,
with
we're-
my blessing, and you both found the loves of your life.
I'm
so that's
sweating
good.
right now. It's so funny. But yes.
Yeah, but
yes.
so I had known you, and then working with you at Ocean
Yeah.
Hills when I was 19.
Do you know
years
who
old.
recommended you to be the intern for me?
Was it my mom?
No. No, it was Jim Burns, youth ministry guru, the guy that wrote the book, the Youth Builder, which was a textbook on youth ministry.
That's humbling.
He's spoken here a couple times. People might know who he is. He has this whole amazing radio ministry and stuff like that.
Jim's
And
the
so
best
Jim
person in
Burns
the
is
world.
amazing. And he was
Yeah.
like, you should hire Melissa Brosch. Or it was Melissa Sands at the time.
Yeah.
You should hire Melissa Sands. She's a kid magnet, he said. Because people were just naturally just attracted to you. And which I think is true, still to this
Wow.
day, you have this magnetism about you that people just want to be around you and stuff. So.
Thank you, buddy. That makes me feel
Yes.
uncomfortable, but I'll receive it.
Well,
Thank you.
Well, good job. All right, so then you came here and you're working in youth ministry.
Working in youth ministry. I worked with Matt for a year in high school, and then I graduated from Azusa Pacific University like that year and got married and started working with Josh Simpson full time in junior high ministry, which before it was even middle school ministry.
Right, that's right.
And so Josh and I worked for 4 years together. That was such fun years doing junior high.
Yep.
And then I, at that point, moved back up to high school as the high school associate pastor for 1 year. And then I became the high school pastor for the next 4.
That's right. And that was pretty sort of groundbreaking time.
Yeah,
right?
It was very cool. Yeah, it was very, very, I was so honored to be able to do that job, and it was a blast.
Yeah, and you were awesome at it, so that's why you did it. So it was great.
It was fun.
Okay, so then now you're in this, just kind of bring us into the current a little bit. So now you're in this area of being the pastor of Disability Ministries.
Yeah.
So just let's talk. I mean, that's obviously kind of a super big shift, like from youth ministry to that. And like, so why? Like, tell us a little bit of the story of like what drew you there? What's some of like the whole way you kind of got into that point?
Yeah, I would say even in high school ministry, when I was the high school pastor, I definitely had a heart for it. For some of our students would have disabilities, or we had a few students in our group that had autism, and I just definitely pulled on my heart. I remember I'd had a mom come to me and say, hey, my daughter, she's on the autism spectrum. She wants to be a part of the group, but this is going to be really hard. I just want you to know. And I think as like this bright-eyed first year as the high school pastor, like, well, yeah, we're going to make it happen and let's do this. And
sometimes it takes that naivete though.
Oh, totally. Like, I was like, let's go. And I'm like, it can't be that hard. What is hard about just, loving people?
Yeah.
And it was really hard.
Yeah.
It was really hard for her. It was really hard for the group, and they ended up leaving. And that really wrecked me. I was like, oh my gosh. And so it definitely created this space inside of me that said, well, I got room to grow here. So thankfully, we had started to make some shifts and make some movements, and I was doing the best that I could, and that girl and her family actually came back, which was very cool. And we had started a life group for kids with special needs, and it was like we would meet in life groups on Sundays, and then so we felt like, oh, this will be maybe a more appropriate group that maybe goes more at their pace, or maybe is a better fit. Yeah. So that worked, and we'd had like 6 kids in that group, and I thought, sweet.
And some really great leaders that really cared for
amazing
and loved for
leaders, like Jesse Brown and Aaron Hemphill now, and
exactly.
It's just like so great.
Yeah.
So it was an interesting time because I thought I had sort of like, oh yeah,
you figured this out.
So I got this so easy. We'll just make a group, for the people with the disabilities, and then you're good. Yeah. And then sort of towards my end of my time as the high school pastor, I was getting kind of tired. So I started having kids. And it's like, oh my gosh, this is really hard to do with little children. And
I felt that way too when my kids were little. Like,
yes,
it was just
it's a lot.
Yeah.
Hume is super fun when you're not bringing your 2 children. So, but my daughter, Ava, when she was about 2, we noticed she wasn't talking, and like, what's going on? Is there a speech delay? What's happening? And these 2 things were kind of happening simultaneously. The high school ministry, the amazing leaders in that ministry, like I remember Lisa McCune and these people that were like, hey, why don't you just integrate everybody? Yeah. Like, that seems silly that we have this
And Lisa
separate
McCune
group.
is someone with some, like, actual knowledge.
Yes, she's a physical therapist in the Orange Unified School District, and she's the one that was helping me alongside with me helping Ava.
Yes.
It was like, why don't you just integrate everybody? I'm like, oh, I feel hesitant, and I don't know if that's a good fit, and because the reality of the situation was I wanted a spot where those students felt like they fit, but I didn't I was afraid. I was afraid that they wouldn't fit, and that the neurotypical students in the group wouldn't be comfortable with them, and
or disrupt.
Or that would be disruptive, or that like, well, what if somebody wants to talk about like that party that they went to that weekend and did horrible things that they're only going to tell their small group leader and life group about at church, but there's someone maybe acting different that would shut them down and they wouldn't share. And I think that's really where I was coming from.
Yep.
But then all of a sudden I find out that my daughter Ava at 2 gets diagnosed with autism. And I'm like, whoa, it floored me. It completely started to unravel everything about everything. But I remember sitting there having these simultaneous conversations with doctors and friends about Ava and what my hope for her is for the future, and having conversations about high school ministry and what my hope for these students are. And I realized, oh my gosh, if somebody tells me that my daughter is going to wreck the conversation in a room of 6 girls when she's in high school, I think I will... I don't know what I'll do, but it won't be pretty. And it like undid me completely. And I thought, wait a minute. And we were having a conversation with Doug Brown. He was just like, maybe we're just not thinking highly enough of our entire group. And I was like, I think that's just got to be the answer. Like, maybe we should just think more highly of ourselves and what we're capable of in terms of creating spaces of belonging. So we abolished that, what I thought was so cool, that life group for students with special needs, and we integrated everybody in their own groups. And you know what the craziest thing is that high school ministry did not crumble. Those groups thrived, and those students learned so many things. And that thought of what I felt like maybe was a liability, I think seeing it through the lens of my daughter made me see it as a gift. And I had to come to terms with my own hypocrisy about that, because that's a really... it's kind of a gross like space to come to, where you're like, oh my gosh, I've just been discriminating against an entire group of people because of my perception of what they're capable of.
And now I care because I have my daughter.
Like, now I'm here. It's like, oh my gosh. So it was definitely, there was a lot of shame there for me, and a lot of like...
How did you process through that? Because that's people feel that about this kind of stuff, or this stuff, or other issues where that you just don't have an experience with, or different people. People are all different, right?
No, totally. Everybody. And you could probably apply this. I always look back on all of my life and think, oh, goodness gracious, what was I like when I was this age? And then I was like sort of embarrassed about my entire life. So maybe by the time I'm like 90, I'll be like, well, it's official. It's just been
I'm pretty sure everyone ever have figured out.
But yeah, so I definitely grieved a lot. I grieved so hard, even just for my daughter. And then I think I processed it by making change. And I'd heard this quote that is a little cheesy, but I love it. But it's thinking about my daughter. It was like, I wouldn't change you for the world, so I'll just change the world for you.
Nice.
And that's good. It was just like, that seems like the only solution here, because you're awesome the way that you are, and I want people to get to experience your greatness. And so then it was like, now we got to just do things different. So I think the way that I sort of coped with it, aside from just grieving and just soaking in the grace of God, God is good. He's not mad at me because I didn't get it. You know what I mean? And
because how do you, this is like, okay, this is probably like super like sensitive, and I just, but like, you sort of like, everybody's sort of probably inside, you want your kid to be sort of quote unquote typical because you probably want to protect them from things, or you want them to feel like they fit into the world or whatever that is, right? And so, but there's this sense where like intellectually you can be like, okay, I know that's sort of like wrong, and I want to like be open and have this like, I'm going to change the world for you, but like, I don't know. I'm just trying to like have like that sense of, so everybody has to kind of go from some sort of process into having like a better sort of state of mind, or whatever, or heart, or the Holy Spirit shaping us, hopefully. But,
Well, and it's interesting because, so I have 2 things to say about that. One is that I think that that's when the gospel actually came alive more for me, was through the lens of disability. I don't know, just my whole faith started to make sense. And when we talk about God loving us, and not, and like the church and Christianity being a place of belonging for people, that made way more sense in terms of just like, come as you actually are. And I think we have a lot of room to grow in that area, but that's ultimately the idea. And so that was super formative for me spiritually. But then I came across this fantastic way of thinking about disability, and it's the 5 disability attitudes in the church. And I think this ministry called Elam Ministries wrote it, but it starts with like sort of the base level, which is just complete ignorance. Like, are there people with disabilities? What? Is this even a thing? Which I can identify places of myself. I remember some Capernaum leaders sitting us down when Josh and I were in junior high ministry, saying like, hey, Capernaum is a young life, a part of young life for teenagers with disabilities, and it's awesome ministry. And I remember being like, what? Like, exactly, I didn't even know that was like a need. I just never thought about it. So it's like ignorance. But then you go a step above ignorance to pity, where you think, oh, poor them. That's such a bummer that maybe you don't look right or act right or talk right, or that life's hard for you. And that would just stink so bad if that was me. I don't even know what I would do. And so it kind of stops there. It just sort of like, ooh, which I think probably we've all felt at one point or another, you know?
Yep.
And then it moves another phase to caring. It's like, oh, look, I see that. I can actually see it. I'm not ignorant to it. I see that people have disabilities, and it tugs at my heartstrings.
Yeah.
And somebody should do something about that.
Yeah.
You know, like
somebody,
maybe not me. I care, but I don't really have the skills or the training or anything like that. So, but I'm totally for it. Go, you know, and I get a lot of the support from people in the care camp for our bridge ministries that we have. And it's awesome. It's a step in the right direction. But the next step, which feels almost like the final step, but it's not, is friendship, where it's like, okay, not only do I care, but I'm actually going to invite you into my life. I'm gonna let you be my friend, and like for reals, be my friend. Like we're gonna hang out. You're gonna be invited to things that you're invited to my kids' birthday parties. You are someone I talk to on a regular basis, not just because I have to or because you're a part of ministry, but because you're my friend.
Right.
And so that level, which is awesome, and I see that happening more and more, and I think it's definitely takes a lot more listening and moving slowly in order to learn just how to be open to that.
Teenagers aren't like the best with like anybody.
Oh yeah,
you know,
totally, yeah.
At times, some teenagers,
Many
but
times,
yeah, exactly.
So then, but the cool thing is that the last level is that you move from ignorance to pity to care to friendship, and then to being co-laborers. Okay. And it's like we're on the same.
Like, I don't need to help you.
I don't need to help you. Like, you're helping me. Like, not only do you not necessarily need me to help you, I can't do this without you.
Yeah. And maybe it's not even, maybe actually it's wrong, because they do need me to help them, but I need them to help me.
Yes.
Because we all need help.
Right. There's this mutuality.
Yeah,
and there's this quote about compassion that says compassion is not a relationship between the healer and the wounded. But it's a relationship between equals. And I love that quote because I think that oftentimes we think about compassion. We think about, my heart is breaking or bursting for someone. And it's not like me swooping down into this space to help someone. It's just saying like, hey, like, we're here. Let's do this together. And so
this is like nerdy, but sorry to interrupt, but I just I've been like studying the word compassion a little bit recently.
Yes.
Because we're thinking of using it as a theme for Christmas. Yeah. And like, so in Latin, it actually means, because passion, like passion of the Christ, is like suffering.
Yeah.
So compassion is together. So suffering together. So it's being able to be in the same place together and in the same suffering. And so isn't that cool? I know.
Rad.
I was just like,
so
I just learned that like last week. I got excited. Okay, keep going.
And so I think that once I realized that, as we like that piece was just like, whoa, we're all on a trajectory. And I think I could look at myself and be like, oh, I see when I was ignorant. I see when I just had pity. I see when I was at care. And sometimes I vacillate between care and friendship and co-laborer, and I think it's that process. But it's important for us to sort of do a little self-examination of like, when I come in contact with people with disabilities or people that are different than me, how do I feel? What's going on inside of me? What's like my emotional temperature? How do I respond? Do I try to get out of there as quickly as possible? And so I think when it comes to, at that point, I'm sorry, relating this back to your original question.
I don't even remember it. No,
which was, I know, wordy.
No, it's good.
But the original question was just sort of, how did you get out of high school ministry and into bridge ministry? And it's like, I think that's what sort of birthed out of that time was we need sort of a specific ministry that has language to articulate what's going on here and can help people move through this and serve and get more proximity, because I think sometimes you just don't know if you don't know somebody with a disability, you're like, I don't know what to do, know? So we started Bridge Ministry. So Bridge Ministry is our official disability ministry at Calvary Church.
Yes.
But it's important to note that disability ministry has been happening at Calvary for years. Like there's not, that's been happening for, been in Known as Stripe for 20 years, had a group called Humble Praise, and Debbie Rowley herself would find buddies for kids for years before anyone even knew she was doing it. And Regina Gary, it was just like all these people.
Yep. And there's there's certain disabilities where it's like people are in have certain needs in a wheelchair of some sort, or if certain and so there's certain levels of care that have to come alongside with that, right?
Definitely.
And so I know even Humble Praise is adults with maybe more severe disabilities, or is that not?
Not always,
not the way to say it? Okay.
And we don't have that class anymore. Now we have a bridge adults class.
That's true.
Yeah,
That's
which
true.
is totally actually open to anyone with or without a disability. But the pace of learning and reading our Bibles is slower.
Good.
It's slower. That takes into account some intellectual disabilities.
Okay.
But we all read the Bible together every week and
that's awesome.
Pray for each other, and it's cool.
So this might be even a good spot to ask this question. I think people are very uncomfortable with language, or just don't know, and all sorts of issues in the world where you're like, what's the word that I shouldn't say? Maybe first of all, can I learn that? I mean, we're not going to say some of those words probably now, but and then what are the better words? But as we learn that, and for me as a guy in my mid 40s, it's the world we grew up in was cruel. Right?
Oh my gosh.
So my childhood was cruel to people. And so how do you sort of filter, trying to you don't want to live in that world, but sometimes that stuff's just in your brain.
Yeah.
But what would be some good ways to understand language?
Yeah, language is totally a tricky one, and it shuts people down and makes everybody uncomfortable. So I can explain a little bit that will help us understand how we talk about it, because I think sometimes we use the word special needs a lot, and I think that feels kinder. I think this is how I always thought about it. It feels kinder, and if you say disabled, then you're telling someone they're bad or they're wrong, and actually that's really neither of those are true. The phrase special needs really comes from special education in the United States of America. So we sort of understand special ed, special needs. It's a lot more children oriented. And so oftentimes, and I say often, I don't want to be absolute about it, because everybody is really different in the way that they talk about it. But adults like to use the word disabled or having a disability. There's also another way to talk about it, which I like. Some people don't feel the need for it. So again, keep in mind, it's always different, but using person first language.
Yeah. People with that
people
kind of
with
thing.
a disability, or, that my friend with Down syndrome, or my daughter with autism.
Yeah.
Although even nowadays people are really rethinking that too, where it's just well, no, it's a part of who I am. I am autistic, and I'm proud of that piece of myself. Or even people using the phrase, I've been labeled with a disability, because maybe my autism wouldn't be that big of a deal if everybody was just a little bit more comfortable with some of my tics or some of my stimming or some of those things. And so some of it is a little bit of tricky. You get into the philosophy of how we look at the world, and is the world just a certain way? And so now we just all try to fit into that way. And so it's like a social construct kind of a situation.
Yes.
But I would say, if I could make a blanket statement that people could disagree with me on, and I would be fine with, but if you're talking about kids, use special needs. If you're talking about adults, use a person with a disability. I don't think you can go wrong with person first language. I think that's always honoring to the person.
Yeah. And if somebody wants to correct you from there, it's fine. I'm just trying to be, I'm trying to honor your personhood.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And that's probably another thing is I don't know, try in your kindest way to speak. But again, too, you probably also don't need to often have to even use language sometimes. You just talk to people, or
Yeah, and I think too, even in remembering this, the child adult thing is tricky, because sometimes, because an adult might have an intellectual disability, they shouldn't ever be treated like a child.
Yes.
It's not like they're not a kid just because they have intellectual disabilities, and maybe they're young at heart, and the way that they express themselves feels so some reckless abandon, and that's so fun and life-giving. But they're also not a child.
They're not a child. Yeah.
Which is why in our adults life group, if we play a game, we play games that adults like to play, and we read our Bibles together, and so I feel like that's really important to honor someone's age and stage.
That's good.
Of life.
That's really good. Yeah, and you've told me sometimes hey, sometimes just be clear and direct, but don't need to talk down.
Yeah, totally.
Hey.
Yeah, and I think clarity in terms of the best kind of disability ministry ultimately is one that doesn't exist at all.
Yes. Okay. Good.
Like, I think that I have a friend who's told me, he's like, oh yeah, sometimes smaller churches, like, they would destroy their disability ministry if they created a disability ministry, because now you've taken people doing life together as they should, people being friends, people being co-laborers in the gospel, and you've pulled them out, set them off to the side, and said, okay, well, this is your place.
Yeah.
And I think that Calvary is a unique church, and there are lots of churches that are in a similar boat where there's a lot of people, and a lot of people are not even aware of what's going on. And so a disability ministry seeks to provide awareness and resources, and just even when people come and visit, and they can know where to go and who to talk to and stuff like that. And so that part, I think, is important for Calvary specifically to have, and many churches to have. And gosh, even I guess I should tell you about the Disability Ministry Conference.
Yeah, absolutely.
Oh yeah. So out of this, our Bridge Ministry, we've been doing that for the last, 5 years.
Okay.
And but out of that, we got connected with some people that hosted a conference for Young Life. Actually, it was like a very small conference. Like, the first one was like 30 people or something like that.
And just give training.
Give training. How do you interact with people with disabilities? How do you honor their age and stage of life? How do you, whatever. And so a member of our church, Regina Garriott, had gone, and she's like, Melissa, you got to have these people come to our church. And I'm like, I got keys. Let's do this. Come to our church. And so they came, and we hosted it here. And Calvary's been a huge, huge part of helping our Disability Ministry Conference get off the ground. And the first year we did it here, it went from like 70 people at the original conference to like 150. And then the next year it was like 250. And the next year it was like 300. We had 350. We had like over 400 people at our last conference, and we were expecting maybe 500 or more at this last one, and then COVID.
Right.
Boo.
Yeah.
But it's been so cool to see the church as a result of Bridge Ministry and even this conference being hosted, and so many of our church leaders have gone and attended and been like, oh wow, this is so cool, and like had their eyes open and their hearts open. That's been a huge part of our Bridge Ministry growing, and more people serving, and
even had like some of our staff, people that like you said, like, it's not just people who are to go to this, it's anybody, not just people who are, let's say, serving in specifically Bridge Ministry or have a child with disabilities or something like that. It's like, so that we can have a world that doesn't need it, right? Like, so we're all just equipped with the tools that we might need so that we don't mess it up.
Exactly. And so, because I've had so many people say to me, like, I don't know if I could do what you do because I just get so uncomfortable. And I just think, well, then let's talk. I'll give you 400 reasons why you don't have to be uncomfortable. And here's some ways to just make conversation, or when conversations get awkward, here's how you just sort of sit with that and be okay with it. Or if someone's not entirely aware of the social situation, here's how you can just tell them what you're thinking. And it's not rude. It's not rude to be, hey, I would really actually like it if you would stop doing that. That makes me uncomfortable. And then oftentimes people will say, oh, thank you.
Yes.
That's love, And so I think some of those things, you realize if everybody just was more comfortable with that stuff and just sort of took the time to understand each other a little bit more, then we wouldn't. Yeah. It would be so easy.
Exactly. I try to so sometimes here, like on the podcast, I'll try to personalize some of these things for me, because and sometimes it's like, it isn't me at my best. Yeah. But with this, there's a couple awesome young men who would be part of Bridge Ministry that love to sit in the front with me at church. Yeah. And I think sometimes it's so awesome and beautiful, and it's so cool, arm around me, and we're just, it's this great thing, and I love that it's I'm here with them, and this is beautiful, and we're singing, and it's even a cool picture to the church, and I've seen even some funny things of Dave, this is 4 or 5 years ago, and just super you think, is he uncomfortable? But he's just amazing, at the same time, and just this beautiful image of love, right? Yeah. But then sometimes I'm like, hey, I gotta go on stage now, and you know what I mean? It's time, and this is actually a moment that you need to not nobody should be disturbing this moment. This is actually a really sensitive moment. And so you've actually taught me just that's that whole clear, direct thing, but just kind, clear, direct. And it's okay. But sometimes I am uncomfortable,
Totally.
Just being honest about that.
No,
but it's
absolutely. And I think it's so important that you are honest about it, because that's where you get the good stuff, because you can say, okay, this is uncomfortable.
Yeah.
And there are parts of it that says, okay, maybe part of it's because you're in.
Part of it's because I've got like 1,500 people or 1,200 people behind me.
Right. There's 1,500 people behind me.
Do the right thing.
And I'm trying to also even in church, we like things seamless. We don't want these.
No, totally. Yeah.
In church, in order to take away distractions so that we can enter into a space of learning and growing, we had tried to eliminate all distractions.
All distractions.
But I think disability ministry definitely bumps in the face of that, and I think checks us in a really good way.
Yeah.
That says, you know what, maybe we don't have to be all that polished all the time.
Right.
But also, sometimes you have to just say what's going on. And I call it, I made this up. I don't know. Maybe I'll publish it someday. So copyright me. But I call it counterintuitive communication.
Okay.
And it's this idea of, if you're in like a situation where everyone is picking up on social cues at a high level.
Yeah.
People can give just a look or okay, deep breath and a nod. And okay, he's done talking to me now.
Yeah. I'm supposed to be quiet now or whatever.
This is a quiet moment or, whatever. And some people can't pick up on those social cues. And if they can't, it feels very counterintuitive, almost mean to be like, hey, I don't want to talk right now. I want to worship. And I don't want to hug or high five. I just want to sit and I'm going to focus in my mind on what God is doing in my heart.
Yeah.
And that feels like, oh gosh, I have to be so direct. But I think it's loving because it's appreciated. And the cool thing about leaning into counterintuitive communication is with kindness and directness, then your like internal anxiety just goes down.
Yeah.
And when your internal anxiety goes down, you can connect better with
people.
And I think that's what oftentimes we don't know what to say or do. So it's like, anxiety's high, and I'm just going to bolt. And now we don't have a relationship. You know what I mean? I just want to get out of this situation.
Yes.
But if we can lean into it a little bit more, and it's not perfect and it's messy. But I think that's one thing I love about disability ministry is that it is just messy. Like there's not a formula, and there's a quote that if you've met one person with autism, you've met one person with autism. Like nobody's autism is the same. And or I think you could probably say that about any disability because every human being is the same. But it's messy and you have to learn and try. But I think that moving towards and moving in and being honest about how you feel will get us so much farther.
Yeah, that's good. Yeah. That's really good. Now, there's this other like sort of, I'm not trying to just like take this over about myself, but like this other thing I'm kind of curious about because I just think some of this stuff might just help people kind of translate, But so like one of my daughters has ADHD. Okay. So that's like wherever that fits on all this kind of stuff. But like it was really hard when she was little. I mean, it was like massive explosions of kind of like rage and no impulse control whatsoever. And it was like almost like chaos in our home and like wanting to just cry and it gives us the rest of our life and like, those sorts of moments.
Totally.
And that's like, that's with ADHD.
Yeah.
And, so like, we've had some great like work and with like different, like kind of like different types of therapists as well as medication. And it's been a good, really, really great thing. But also the way we like chose to talk about it in our home was we talked about it as this, we talked about it as her superpower.
Oh my gosh.
So I don't know if this is like a thing
That's
or
exactly
something.
what we do. Keep
okay. Okay. Awesome. Yeah. Because we're just like, this actually, it actually gives her this incredible, at times, like specialized focus, as well as like kind of just like this different sort of energy and drive and enthusiasm and whatever. And if it's like channeled appropriately, it's really good. Like you can be a superhero for like evil. You can use your superpowers for like evil, like the bad guys, or like or for good. And so it's just like, hey, use this like. For good. So see this as something that is a superpower in your life that other people actually don't get to have. Yeah.
No, okay. I couldn't agree more. Okay, and I think in our home, we are very proud of Ava's autism. It is a superpower. We talk about how it's a superpower all the time. And, Ava can remember everybody's name. And she's very sensitive to even other people's emotions, which I think there's often a stigma that kids with autism aren't tuned into what's going on. I think they're hyper tuned in, and it's a little bit like circuit breaker shutting down sometimes. But and so she's phenomenal. And so she has all these gifts that we talk about. And then we also talk about the challenges that comes with every thing that has a superpower also has a challenge.
Absolutely.
But also I think talking about it, I don't ever want there to be shame around that. I want it to be only, I'm an extrovert and I'm wordy, and that's a gift when you're on a podcast.
Right.
But when you're a kid in school or you have to sit through a staff meeting where the boss man just keeps talking, you're like, oh my gosh, this is hard. When do I get to talk? So it's like a challenge as well. So, I think talking about it more and even inviting other people to talk about their disabilities and tell me what your experience is. How do you feel about that? How do you experience it? It just takes away all that sense of like, I'm tiptoeing around who you are. And I don't ever want us to tiptoe around who we are as people, because ultimately that is what the difference between fitting in and belonging is.
Right.
Which I think the fact that I swear it was right around the time that Bridge Ministry was starting that we sort of changed better together.
Yes.
And that phrase. And I was like, that is my whole heart. I was like, yes. And I still think we have a lot to learn about what does it mean to be better together. But I think disability is a part of that. It's like, no, I'm actually better when you get to just be here and there is no prerequisite to you belonging. You just get to be yourself, that you're here and you're ours and we're together. And I love that. And I think it's a step in the right direction for us as a church.
Yeah. Okay. So like, what have you learned maybe in some of as you've been growing in this and kind of reading and all that, like what do you feel like maybe some of like, what is like God's heart to people with disabilities, or even the way we would approach stuff like this?
Yeah.
I know.
Oh man.
I know it's like possibly just like super obvious.
Yeah, it is, and it isn't. I think like all of the good stuff is like, oh, duh.
Right.
But it's the hard stuff to do. I would say that I would want people to always move towards people. I think that the message of the entire Bible and all of Christianity is a God who moves towards his people. I mean, in the most insane way of like, here I've created you and I'm making myself known to you and I'm making myself known to you so much so that I will break through heaven to be a human and be with you.
Right.
And so that is that movement towards, and I think that if we have to really check how often we want to move away from what makes us uncomfortable and how much we want to separate from people. And that is the exact opposite of how God is, and how he wants us to be.
Right.
And so I would say that anytime we can sort of check that, that moving away reaction and make it a moving towards, and that may mean, I don't know, call me. Like you may have someone in your life, like, I don't know how to move that towards that person. Oh, call me.
Yeah. I'll walk you through it a bit.
I'll walk you through it. Anybody, or talk to, if there's somebody in Bridge Ministry that you see that's a volunteer, ask them what they think and go for it.
Yes.
Don't shy away. And that's essentially why we have that Disability Ministry Conference, is just to equip people to know, to move towards people, essentially.
Right. That's so cool, because you think if any being had the right to remove themselves from like anything that is different or something, it's like the God of the universe, like can just sit upon throne in heaven or whatever.
Yeah.
And that sense of then, like Jesus moving towards us. And then even like we just talked about recently, like even just Jesus calling us friend, like, and you're like, whoa, he's really getting at our level. Like, and so don't think you can like deserve to be something better than anybody, or like that you're somehow not without need.
Yes, totally.
So that's intriguing. I like that. I like that sense of thinking about God moving towards us. That's really good. And so, okay, you've talked a little bit about what Calvary currently does, but like, again, for everybody to understand, like that concept is like to have a disability ministry that almost doesn't exist, that everyone's mainstreamed, right?
Yeah.
So that's the heart.
I would say, so we don't have, everything we do is pretty much full inclusive, unless it's not better for the person. You know what I mean? Like our goal is like, we don't have like a special class. I'm not entirely opposed to it, again, if it was actually better for the person who needed a special class.
Right.
But we're not going to just have a special class because it's hard and I feel like we've made huge strides. Like all of our children's ministries and student ministries have attended the conference and like gotten some training, and even the students as well. And we have young leaders, which is so fun to see.
That's cool.
And even we've made accommodations in our classrooms. Like we've got wiggle mats and some sensory boxes all across the campus. So that helps.
Even little things like where we do beach baptisms now is like different because we're trying to be more inclusive of people. Like let's not have it at a place that's like impossible to walk to.
Right. Unless you're like super fit and like,
exactly.
I can barely get up there.
Exactly.
So we're making changes all of the time. We're working on accessibility in every possible way.
We're working on subtitles in our videos and more ASL sign language kind of stuff as well.
Totally.
Which is like a little bit different, but still. Yeah.
But it's like, I think the idea is making room for everybody. And if we cover every base, then we never have to go back and fix it later. It's like, let's just become completely accessible, not just physically and technologically, but also I think in our hearts to be accessible there.
Which is probably even more important.
Yeah, I think it probably starts there. If you get accessible in your heart, you'll start to see things.
Yeah.
And there's things that you don't know unless you experience it. I didn't, I feel like we're always trying to help with our ramps and stuff, and our campus is the way that it is. But I think even future plans, I know it's like that's a thought of how do we get more ramps? Because if you don't, if you start pushing a stroller, that you're like, wait, I parked on the fruit side, and now it's like a maze to get through. But that's harder if somebody's coming in a wheelchair or something. So I know that there's things that take longer to fix and stuff.
Right.
But I would say as a whole, I've loved to see how we've awoken together as a church a little bit, and are continuing to awaken to who is here and how we can be more connected, and that's where we're just sort of chipping away at that 5 stages and getting closer and closer. So in a dream world,
what are your
my
hope for the
dream
future?
world, I would love if Bridge Ministry just didn't even exist. Maybe just as a name, so people who knew that they could come here, but that true. My job is obsolete, and that all of the students, even the kids in kids ministries, that their parents talk about disabilities at home, so that their kids aren't like weirded out when a kid grabs their crayon and colors on their paper.
Right.
Oops, she kind of didn't know what she was doing. It's fine.
Right.
And I think, I think we're closer to that than we could ever dream. And to be honest, you got to think the school systems like Tustin Unified and other places that are just more inclusive. Children are honestly way better at this. And even teenagers now are better than most adults are at this because they've been seeing it. They've had people in their classes that have disabilities. They have programs like Best Buddies at a lot of high schools and stuff like that.
Neat. Yeah,
and so I think the awareness.
Right, where I grew up in a world where it was like separation,
complete separation,
right? Complete separation.
Yeah, and I
like other schools.
Yeah,
right.
Just like
stuff like
what?
That.
And there are some special day classes, but even those are getting less and less. And sometimes they're needed. I don't want to put a blanket statement about a way something is supposed to be, but I think in a perfect world, everyone would feel ready to jump in and get to know someone and move in, and just to even be uncomfortable. I feel like it's one of the most spiritually like cathartic moments to be in a situation where everything you're normally good at doing and communicating doesn't actually work. I started teaching at Saddleback College. I teach adults with intellectual disabilities there, and teach like independent living skills and stuff. And it's such an interesting thing.
You actually know those for yourself?
What? Barely. True story. When we talk about personal safety, I'm always like, oh, whoops.
Sorry, no, keep going. Sorry.
It's 100% true. But I've been a youth pastor, and it's all about communicating dynamically, and I talk fast and
loud.
And I get in this room, and it's like, oh, none of my teaching skills are helpful. And there is so much pause. And
I would struggle.
So much pause. Like minutes of pause to let someone talk, because it takes them a little bit longer to communicate. Or we cover one very small thing for 3 hours, and 30% of the class can actually retain it at the end of 3 hours. But they absolutely deserve that education, and they deserve the opportunity to learn it. And so it is I feel like it is a spiritual moment to sit there and to surrender to that. And it's like, okay, this is good. This is making me a better person, to sit here with you, which goes into that co-laborer thing. It's like, sure, I can make the lessons, but I don't think anyone else in the world can teach me how to sit in the present, in my own skin, in this time, like they can.
Absolutely.
And so I'm really grateful for it. And I think the more we can be excited to see what people with disabilities can teach us, then that playing field is going to be leveled.
That's cool. I even see too, you've got the Michelle Sullivan Littlest Warrior Advocate Like a Mother shirt on.
I love it.
Which is good. It's very appropriate for our conversation today. But because that's a thing, right? That like, is there a way too that, because you're advocating like a mother for your kids, but like, kind of how can even people come alongside, or is there, I don't know.
I think in terms of just being responsive, but also helping raise awareness. When we got Ava's diagnosis, I bought, 10 copies of Why Is He Doing That that Rachel Cuellar wrote. And passed it out to all my neighbors. Yeah. And I said, read this to your kids. Like, I want them to understand what this is. And that's kind of one effort of advocating. But like, the coolest thing is that the parents in my neighborhood were like, on it, we'll do it. Let's go. Really and I think that's that sense of being responsive and making yourself available is a really, really big thing. And also, I think maybe opening yourself up to building an actual friendship with somebody with a disability that is going to it's going to change you. You're going to have to change. Your pace will have to change. Your ability to sit in silence a little bit will have to change. Wow. But like, ultimately, we just have to change. And that's not, and I think what we do a lot in our society is we expect people with disabilities to change. It's like, it's almost like what's like the majority? It's like, okay, well, the minority has to change. The dominant has to change in order to fit. And I think what disability ministry has taught me is, no, I need to change. You need to change. We all just have to change. Yeah. And it's messy and uncomfortable, but like, ew, what? We're just going to stay the same? That's gross.
Exactly. We're always growing. We should be always growing.
Right. So
that's good. That's good. Okay. So anything else that you want people to know?
I guess I just want people to know that your life will be richer, better, more deeply spiritual if you can move towards people with disabilities and make room for them in your lives, in your businesses, in your homes, in your friendships, in your church, in where you sit in the pews, all of it. Like, make room.
That's good. That's good. I am incredibly proud of you and the way that like God has been shaping you through all of your own story. And I love every part of your story and every part of you and have for so long. And so just, I think it's really awesome to see like the way God has like been shaping your heart for this. Yeah.
Thank you. I am so grateful for what God's done. I'm grateful that Calvary Church has been a place that's let me say, hey, let's start a disability ministry.
Absolutely.
And hey, I'm going to move into this. I'm going to move out of student ministries and into this, and that everyone was just like open to that.
That's right. That's right.
I'm very grateful.
Well, good. Okay, so how can people? Are there ways people can find out more, maybe online or Disability Ministry Conference? Or Calvary?
Check out disabilityministryconference.com. We just put up a. What is it? Oh, it was like a live stream that we did that's up there. It'll be up there for a really long time. It's like an hour of some really great training. Okay. And I do an interview with Dr. Karen Bergstrom, our very own. She's super
been
awesome.
On the podcast here.
Yeah, she's like, I just want her fixing my brain all the time. And so it's really cool. That's even a great place to start with some training. And there's some great books. There's a book by Heather Avis called Scoot Over and Make Some Room. I think that would be it's a good read for even just learning how to make room.
Okay, cool.
Ways to think about things differently.
And do we have stuff on our website about it, like calvarylife.org?
Yes, we do. We have a bridge page. Yeah. It needs a little updating. Sure. Disability Ministry Pastor slacking COVID. But yeah.
By the time you actually watch or listen to this podcast, I'm sure it will be updated.
It will be super updated, I promise.
No, but that's great. No, that's great for people to be able to then find out more there, and mostly just how it can like find out a little bit and get pointed in the right direction if they'd like to be involved or
and Randy has a disability section in the bookstore.
Cool.
So that if you ask for him, he's got all my recommendations that I throw at him all the time. And
okay, cool.
So yeah.
Perfect. Okay, well, thank you so much, Melissa.
Thank you. This is fun.
Yeah,
thanks to everybody
fun.
if you listen to this whole thing.
I know, exactly. Yeah. So thank you. So thank you for listening to the Calvary Life Podcast.